Welcome, one and all, to another recording of the EMS Pod with Chief Randall. As this new year has begun, we always like to reflect on some of the actions, activities, and legal things happening in EMS from the year before. And I am privileged to have an esteemed attorney who has been representing the likes of EMS from across the country in many different facets, Douglas Wolfberg. Good day, Mr. Wolfberg. How are you doing, sir?
Good, Chief. Hello. Nice to see you and great to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. I would like to give our listeners just an opportunity to, first of all, who is this man, Douglas? Which, of course, you're number one Douglas. I'm number two Douglas now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if you're asking who I am, I'm an attorney and a founding partner with Page Wolfberg and Worth. I spent a long time, many years in EMS as a field provider, as a county EMS director, regional EMS director. I worked at the state and federal levels. Then I went to law school. So I've been in EMS over 45 years. And I've been a practicing attorney for just short of 30 years. Those overlapped. I'm not 75 years old, by the way. So my practice is focused exclusively, and our firm's practice is solely focused on representing EMS agencies across the country.
Okay, fantastic. I'm glad that you redid the math for us all. So what happened in 2024? What are some of the big things, the big takeaways in some of the cases and legalese of that year?
Well, I would say probably the biggest, event in EMS legal developments was the sentencing early this year of the two paramedics who were convicted right at the end of 2023. They were convicted, but the sentencing wasn't until 2024 of the two paramedics who were convicted of criminally negligent homicide. And one of the two was also convicted of assault, second-degree assault, in the Colorado case involving Elijah McClain. Those sentences were, startling. One was sentenced essentially to work release, and the other, who had the additional conviction of second-degree assault, which is strange. Listen, your listeners and viewers might find this strange, but the conviction for second-degree assault is actually more serious of a crime, at least in Colorado, than the conviction for criminally negligent homicide was, because second-degree assault is actually considered a crime of violence. So that practitioner received a sentence of 5 years in jail. And a few months later, what was really also surprising is that the judge who sentenced that paramedic commuted essentially, or vacated that sentence, and released the paramedic. Under Colorado law, the judge is allowed to do that after the defendant serves a certain number of days in prison of their sentence. I think it's like some weird number, like 129 days. But as soon as that number came, the judge commuted the sentence and released that paramedic. So I guess that gives us an idea of how the judge, viewed their liability in this case. So both of those paramedics were convicted, but are now free. And I'll certainly leave it to your viewers and listeners to determine whether or not they think, that is justice. I think there's a lot of mixed views about that, but that's where that case sort of ramped up and ended in 2024. Now, I should note that case is also on appeal. So even though those two practitioners are free, they are convicted of these crimes, which are serious offenses, and their legal team is pursuing appeals, and those appeals are pending. So in 2025, we expect to get decisions on those appeals. I'll stop and let you ask any follow-up questions you have on that, but then I'll tell you about another big 2025 case. But go ahead.
So, as a lawyer, what would you believe the change in the way the judge handled the case? Like, what would be the impetus for that, would you say?
Well, I think the judge was constrained to follow the law when the jury returned the convictions. the law has certain minimum sentencing ranges in the statutes for convictions on certain offenses. For criminally negligent homicide, the judge was allowed to impose a sentence of work release, and there wasn't mandatory jail time. But for the second degree assault charge, there was. So the judge was constrained to do that. And he had some very strong words against the conduct of the paramedics when he sentenced them. But I think commuting their sentence, the law says for extraordinary circumstances. And the judge never really described what he believed those extraordinary circumstances were. He never really ruled in a way that included all that detail. So it's hard to read his mind, but I think if you could read between the lines of what he said, that you would probably conclude that he found this case to be a significant tragedy, as I think we all did, but that holding these EMS responders criminally accountable at the end of the day may have been a stretch. Certainly, the prosecution had a case to bring. They prevailed in that case. A message was sent loud and clear. And I think maybe it could be said the judge feels that, enough justice has been done with the conviction and the sentencing. And, again, that's my speculation, but I think those would be at least my takeaways. And I've had a chance to talk to some of the attorneys involved in the case, and I think they probably see it the same way.
Yeah, very good. And on this program, I love to have healthy debates. And if there are people that are listening to this and they want to discuss it further on not necessarily the legal side, but the perception of it, then I'm welcome to that. The only thing that we do not accept, allow, or condone is hateful speech. So I want to make sure that's clear. But a healthy debate, love to have it. All right. So what else?
Well, I was just going to say, when you invited a healthy debate, I think that's great. And, I got to tell you, I've heard very passionate debate and issues on both sides of that particular case, right? There are people who say, this was horrible care. And I don't think anybody agrees that the care was good, right? Anybody who's watched the videos in that case, there certainly were shortcomings in the care. But I think where people really diverge in their opinions is whether or not, okay, fine, sue him for malpractice, bring a civil lawsuit, which the family did, and there was a big payout from the city. But to charge them with crimes is really a bridge too far. We've all been involved in cases, that are chaotic and, like that. And then there's others that say, absolutely, they killed this. People really do have strongly held opinions. I haven't encountered anybody who said, yeah, I don't know, kind of, I'm lukewarm about it. People are really opinionated on either side of that case, but there is a lot to be learned from it, and healthy debate about what that case means is really a good thing. So it's good of you to invite that healthy debate. So when you said what else, I think, here in 2025, the other big shoe to drop is the other major criminal case that's pending, that is scheduled to go to trial in 2025. And that's the case involving the EMS clinicians in Illinois who cared for a person named Earl Moore, who died after he was restrained in a prone position on the ambulance cot. And in that case, the prosecutor brought charges of first-degree murder against the two EMS providers in that case. And that it doesn't really get any more serious than first-degree murder. And this was an individual. I think a lot of folks saw those videos. I talked about this last time I was here, where the person was really lethargic, had an altered level of consciousness, and was essentially dragged to the stretcher by police, who were helpful, but EMS didn't really take any efforts to properly package or move the patient. And then when he was dragged out to the front yard where the stretcher was waiting, he was sort of forcefully put down in a prone position. And then you can see one of the providers just yanking the straps. The autopsy report showed that Mr. Moore actually had broken ribs that were incurred during that interaction. And, was kept in a position of prone restraint during transport. It was a short transport, but by the time he was at the hospital, he was in cardiac arrest and could not be resuscitated. So after looking at body cam video and reading the medical examiner's report, the prosecutor there charged those two providers with first-degree murder, and that case is pending. Now, those two practitioners are out on bail, but those charges are pending. And in 2025, we expect to see either a trial or plea agreement. Defendants can always plea, and probably see some form of resolution to that case, which is the other really big shoe to drop on the criminal side of EMS.
Wow. I remember you discussing this the last time, and it was almost just unreal to even hear the allegations, like that actually happened. You heard more about this, in yesteryear where folks were prone and there was a big push to ensure that patients were treated properly. And it just looks like this one may have fallen through the cracks if all those allegations are true.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, the video evidence is clear, absolutely clear that the person was in a prone position and was forcefully restrained with straps. Of course, charges are allegations, but there is video evidence, and I don't think there's any doubt or debate about the fact that the EMS providers did what they did. I think the bigger legal issue is, of course, whether or not that caused Mr. Moore's death. But of course, there'll be medical testimony. The medical examiner will testify. There'll be a lot that if it goes to a jury, that the jury will have to consider about cause of death. But certainly, again, it's hard. There's no redeeming value in the care that they gave. Nobody could look at that and say they did a good job. But again, what were criminal charges appropriate? I think most people in that case believe that they were. But a lot of folks say, wait a minute, first degree murder, we could see negligent homicide or reckless manslaughter, but first degree murder is really a very serious charge. But everybody says, well, isn't that premeditated? If they'd have, brought a gun and planned to shoot the next patient that they encountered, it doesn't always require premeditation. And the law in Illinois certainly does allow the prosecutors to bring the charges. But, I guess at the end of the day here, Chief, I don't think EMS providers should be thumbing through their statutes and going, wait, how exactly could I be charged with first degree? I'm going to do just less than that, right? In this day and age of cameras everywhere, we have to always assume that they're present. And when police are there, there's going to be body cams. Bystanders could be there with cell phone cameras. There could be a private surveillance camera in a home or at a workplace, traffic cameras overhead, crime prevention cameras in cities, right? There's going to be cameras. And if you can't see them, still assume that they're there. And it's not enough just to be competent. You have to be performative. And what I mean by that is you have to be seen and heard, being a patient-centered advocate, because somebody somewhere is probably recording you, and you do not want to come off looking like, an uncaring, unsympathetic jerk when you're doing your job, because that makes it easier for a prosecutor to charge you. And just last point, I promise I'll stop and let you ask more questions. But, folks have been despaired, I think, in some cases since these criminal charges. Well, this is crazy. If they're charging EMTs and paramedics, I want out, right? I didn't sign up for this. This could happen to us. Well, instead of saying what could happen to us, this is a golden opportunity for all EMS providers to say, what can we control? How can we take back some of that power? How we can do it is by controlling our actions. All of us always have the right to control how we're going to look if there is a camera present someplace. We can control acting with empathy. We can control speaking with respect to patients. We can control being seen and heard on these videos, talking and interacting like a team. If we see somebody in a prone position, hey, officer, that's not safe. Can we reposition him, right? Being seen and heard, advocating for the patient. That's how we can control what happens to us.
I couldn't have said it any better than the way you just said that. The only thing that I would add to it was there have been healthy debates about, well, PD's in charge of the scene. And what I have told hundreds of EMTs and paramedics. That is your patient, period.
Bravo, Chief. Yeah, you could tell the cops it's your scene, but it's our patient, right?
Yeah,
And and this idea, by the way, I've also, since these cases have unfolded, been asked, and you probably have too, many, many times, okay, at what point does a law enforcement scene become an EMS patient, right? When is that handoff? What's that holy line of demarcation when they go from theirs to ours? And it's interesting because I don't think there is a single point in time where it's their suspect, but now our patient, right? I mean, what if we've been talking about Earl Moore and Elijah McClain and people who were innocent people, right? Weren't bad people, didn't do anything wrong. But what
right.
if I do have a person who's in custody who somebody just witnessed committed a violent act? We know this is a bad person. Okay, but our role is to treat a human, not to make judgments about the person who's laying there needing our help. And yeah, if that is a violent person, maybe law enforcement is going to continue to keep that person restrained and not surrender them to us to take away to the hospital. Maybe they're going to be there the whole time. Maybe they're going to keep the person in cuffs. Maybe they're going to ride along. Fine, but we have to provide the care that we have to provide. It doesn't mean law enforcement's role is done, you know, but
Right.
but our role and their role have to coexist. We have to train for that. We have to develop muscle memory for that. If we see things that are dangerous, well, okay, this may be a bad guy, but whether he's bad or good, keeping him prone, laying on the sidewalk with his face in the pavement and his hands behind his back with handcuffs on, that's medically dangerous, and I'm going to speak up and say that, right?
Yeah.
So, those are very important points, in 2025 and beyond.
Very good. I think we can get deeper into this, but I'll allow those listeners with their opinions to come on and let's talk about it because I think this is an important topic. When we talk about moving a profession forward, you have to understand what the lumps are and learn how to deal with it as a provider. So let's do that as a system, not just as a person. So I saw a couple of things recently about CMS, and there's some rulings. Is that something that you're familiar with? You want to get into a little bit about when it comes to CMS?
Yeah, so CMS on the reimbursement side,
Yeah,
certainly, there's lots of things still up in the air as 2025 approaches, and that is, Medicare has a system where they pay ambulance services for transports under a fee schedule, and every couple of years that fee schedule has a couple of percent additional reimbursement in it, and that always expires because of the way the law is written. And we're waiting really to see if Congress restores those temporary that have been in place for over 20 years bonus amounts. And if Congress doesn't act, we could see reimbursement reduced in 2025. So we're certainly hopeful that as we're meeting today and speaking here, that Congress will restore those bonus amounts and extend those add-on payments that ambulance services get. That's one pretty big development that we're keeping an eye on. CMS has announced an inflation adjustment. I think it's 2.6%. So there's at least a little bit of an inflationary increase that gets added on in 2020 for 2025. But of course, yeah, always that kind of stuff happening with CMS. Anything else I can particularly address for you?
No, so there's a couple of things that I know I've talked to Dr. Anteri about, like blood products in the field, and there's this huge push with mobile integrated healthcare and working on reimbursement, and that's exciting, right? From one side of the country to the other. What are your thoughts on those types of topics and how those things are growing when it comes to EMS and potentially reimbursement?
Yeah, so well, good. Thanks for the reminder. In 2025, CMS, for dates of service January 1, 2025, and after, CMS has added whole blood transfusions to the list of ALS2 interactions. So if certain interventions are done, like manual defibrillation, endotracheal intubation, intraosseous line, central venous line, there's a list of advanced interactions that bump the call up from ALS1 to ALS2. CMS is adding whole blood transfusions to that in 2025. So that's good news that CMS is recognizing these clinical innovations and allowing reimbursement to keep pace. Now, I think most people would tell you that whole blood programs are still more costly than what CMS is paying, but it's a step in the right direction. Look, these whole blood programs, I keep seeing, as you probably do too, case study after case study after case study that shows incredible success with very serious trauma patients, and really amazing results. And folks like Peter Antevi and medical directors across the country that are promoting and implementing whole blood transfusion programs. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of logistics, how you store the blood, the expense of it, all of that. But it's impactful. And I think EMS medical directors, I'm a lawyer, so I'll pivot to the legal side, really have to start to look and say, okay, is this a new standard of care that we're going to be negligent if we don't do this, right? And I think whole blood always shows is a good example of that age-old debate. When does something become standard of care? And there's usually not one, wise man that descends the mountain with holding the stone tablet saying, okay, here's your new standard of care. Sometimes we get new state policies or protocols or laws or regulations, and you got to follow it. But clinical standards are evolutionary as opposed to revolutionary. We have to look at the research. We have to look at best practices. And every system has to say, is this something that's gone from a good idea to now this is a standard of care, and if we don't do it, we've got problems? And I think whole blood is really starting to make a strong case for this isn't just a good thing you should consider adopting, but EMS systems across the country, the evidence seems to be in, you need to do this.
Wow, there's a commercial that I'm reminded of that's going to date me, and I'm sure you don't remember this because you're much younger, but it's an E.F. Hutton commercial. When E.F. Hutton talks, people listen. And I think the words that you're saying today, especially, people have to listen to that. And not in the vein of, oh my God, this guy's an attorney and we're going to be in trouble. But we need to look progressive. We need to be forward thinking. And we need to make sure that we're not involved in anything that could set us back. So that's a pretty awesome statement about whole blood.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm definitely old enough, Chief, to as soon as you said E.F. Hutton, I went like that because I remember the commercial. 2025, by the way, is also the year I turned 60. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so
Well,
I'm up there.
so I'll thank you for your happy birthday. I'll give you a happy birthday now and reaching another milestone, correct?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So anything about reimbursement when it comes to mobile integrated healthcare that you've been aware of? What are the happenings with that? Because there are many programs that I've talked to, that I've heard from, that have talked about that, but they have run into this issue of reimbursement because it's a zero-sum game, right?
Yeah, so it's a great question. On the reimbursement side, unfortunately, CMS discontinued the ET3 pilot program, which was the first time Medicare was paying for non-transport, treatment on scene, and certain, other services, alternate destinations. I mean, that was a great idea, and it remains a great idea, even though CMS canceled the program. A couple of things. First is that I don't think EMS agencies should throw up their hands and get out of the mobile integrated care business just because CMS discontinued the ET3 program. We can still approach other payers, commercial payers, state Medicaid programs. Many states have passed laws now to require that type of payment for non-transport services under state Medicaid programs and commercial insurance policies. And we can even enter into agreements with individual insurers to pay for those non-transport services. It saves them hundreds or thousands of dollars to not transport a patient. It remains a good idea. But let me just also add this, because I haven't heard as much talk about this. Everybody's focused on reimbursement, and we need it. But there's two sides of a ledger, right? There's the receipts, and then there's the expenses. Look, when ambulances get on scene and find an EMS units get on scene and encounter a low acuity patient, right? We've assessed them, their vitals are stable, they have no significant medical history, right? We know this is a low acuity patient. If my protocols are always designed that I've got to transport to the hospital emergency room in all these cases, well, it's needless in many of those low acuity cases. Those are the cases where the ambulances spend, in some cities, hours on the wall waiting to offload those low acuity patients. It wrecks my unit hour utilization and my deployment. I've got EMTs and medics stacked on the wall, not available for 911 responses in the community. Mutual aid has to come in. We pay overtime to people, whatever. We've got all these problems. So I can reduce the expense side of my ledger by avoiding unnecessary ambulance transports. Yeah, I don't get reimbursed, but what do I make up in deployment costs, staff costs, overtime, burnout, retention, and all of these other things that are expensive pieces of my deployment, right? So if I have certain populations that are high utilizers, substance abuse, mental health, then start developing arrangements with other types of facilities, other types of practitioners that I can take patients to clinics, I can take them to non-hospital destinations with agreements. I can't just waltz in right to a doctor's office. Hey, we're here. It's, you're a patient now. But I can put those pathways into place. Even if Medicare's out of the ET3 business, I can still look at the other side of the ledger. How do we deploy? Why do we have to transport every single person who calls us? Work with our medical director, put policies and protocols in place, and avoid the unnecessary transports and unnecessary utilization that comes with some of these types of low acuity cases. So I think that's the other side of the mobile healthcare ledger that people need to also remember is a part of what makes these services sustainable.
Yeah, I think this is really a two-pronged approach, and I appreciate you going to both sides of the ledger to discuss it. A, because we just ended an election season, now you have a lot of lawmakers, especially in these states, that some may be new to the game, right? And so now this gives you a chance to get acquainted with them and let them know some of the needs that you have within those states. So local elections, state elections, those are the ones where you can really make a difference with getting what you need for your services. So totally agree with that. And then B, I'm going to give you a term, Douglas, that is going to blow your mind today. And the term is EMS prevention. Similar to what fire service has done with fire prevention. What is EMS prevention? All those things you just mentioned. It's encapsulated in ensuring that these people that are not the high acuity types are getting the right care that they need, which is outside of an ED. So that's something for EMS chiefs, directors, folks that are responsible for patients and showing up at these homes where the mobile integrated healthcare program could be very beneficial. So let's see if that catches fire, the term EMS prevention.
I like it, Chief, and I like the parallel that you drew between fire prevention, right, and EMS prevention. And we're not trying to put ourselves out of business, but we're trying to get the right care, the right services to the patient at the right time and in the right place. And this model that every call deserves a response and every response deserves a transport and every transport has to go to an ER, right?
Yeah.
That monolithic model is unsustainable. It's clinically inappropriate in many, many cases. And what is it? The clinical definition of insanity is doing the same thing again and again, right? And expecting different results.
Yeah.
So you're absolutely right. And by the way, we're talking about, assessment, treatment, alternate destinations, non-transport. We got to incorporate also add telehealth to that because we can bring advanced practice providers, physicians, nurse practitioners, PAs, and others into the decision making. So we're still protecting patients, right?
Right.
And that can also start when the phone rings. We can take our medical protocols, our dispatch protocols to the next level when we can identify those patients who aren't going to clinically benefit from a transport or even a response at the time of the call. And we can connect those people with other types of primary care, substance abuse, counseling, other kinds of services, and divert some of those calls from having to go out to EMS dispatch diversion, we call that, right? That process of optimizing the right response and the right interventions can start when the phone rings, and it can be part of the process from the call to the response to the on-scene assessment to the decision to transport, and then where do we take them? All of those questions, they're not sacrosanct, they're not chiseled in stone. We can be revisiting what we do and how we deploy at every step of the process.
Yeah, this thing is multifaceted. It can really grow into something that is positive. And our goal is always at the end of the day that the person that calls the 3-digit number gets what they need.
That's right. That's right. I mean, we all know lots of people call 911 and say, I want an ambulance. Okay, well, I want a private jet, right? I mean, there's lots of things I want, but I can't
Uh,
get, right?
right.
If I want that ambulance because I stubbed my toe and I don't have any other way to get to the hospital, not that I even need to go to the hospital, right? What the public wants isn't always what the public clinically needs or what's most appropriate. So this idea of just deployment because people asked, it's like going up to the pharmacy counter and say, yeah, hey, how's it going? I don't have any prescription or anything, but I would really, really like some benzodiazepines, you know what I mean? Or some narcotic analgesics, you know. What I want and what's clinically appropriate are two different things.
Excellent. Absolutely. This has been a really fun way that we're going to start this new 2025 year. And hopefully people listen, take heed, and look at making some changes within their service areas that help those patients in the long range. So I appreciate your time, your attention, and of course, always these crazy things that are happening. You're right on top of it. And we all appreciate that from you.
Well, thank you. It was great to be here, and hope we can all make 2025 a great year for our profession and everybody involved in it.
Well, there's one last plug that I wanted to put in, and there's a big conference coming up in Indy. One is the FDIC in April, and the second one is EMS World that's coming later on in the year. And would love to catch up with you if you're coming out, and we sit down. And I don't drink coffee, sir, so if it's a juice or water, I'll be fine with that.
It makes you one of the few fire and emergency services people who do. I don't. I drink decaf. I gave up caffeine about 30 years ago, 35
Mhm.
years ago, but I still do enjoy my decaf. But no artificial stimulants.
Yeah, they call me special, just like my mama did, so I'm not surprised.
That's
So,
great.
well, thanks again. I appreciate it. I wish your 2025 to be amazing, and your 60th birthday party is out of this world.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.
All right, I'll see you soon. And listeners, I just want you to know you just got a treat. And if you have further questions, you want to get into these healthy conversations about some of the things that Douglas and I spoke about, then please hit me up on the EMS POD with Chief Randall. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.